Every morning, millions of people wake up and immediately reach for their phones to check social media, desperate for validation and connection, while the true source of joy sits untapped within them. We've been sold the greatest lie of our time. That happiness is something to be pursued, purchased, or achieved rather than recognized as our natural state. This collective delusion has made us perfect consumers, but terrible at being human. We spend our lives chasing external solutions to internal problems, wondering why the new car, the promotion, the relationship, or the vacation only brings fleeting pleasure before the emptiness returns. The truth is both liberating and threatening to our entire social order. No one and nothing outside yourself has ever had the power to make you truly happy, and nothing ever will. The moment you decide that your happiness depends on something outside yourself is the moment you surrender your power. How many of us have spent our lives waiting to the perfect conditions to feel joy, waiting for the promotion, the relationship, the house, the car, the vacation, always waiting for something external to give us permission to feel good inside. And in that waiting, life passes us by. What if I told you that you've been looking in all the wrong places? What if joy isn't something to be found, but something to be recognized, something that's been inside you all along? I want to ask you a question, and I want you to answer it honestly to yourself. When was the last time you felt truly, deeply happy without any reason at all? Not because something wonderful happened, not because you achieved something, not because someone said something nice to you, but simply because you chose to be. For most of us, that question leaves us stumbling for an answer. And that stumbling reveals something profound about how we've been taught to experience life. We've been conditioned to believe that our internal state must be a reaction to our external circumstances. What a magnificent lie that is. A lie that keeps us trapped in a perpetual state of seeking, never finding, always wanting more. There's a story about a woman who spent her entire life searching for a precious jewel. She traveled across mountains, deserts, and oceans. She consulted with sages and scholars. She dedicated every waking moment to finding this treasure. After decades of searching, exhausted and on her deathbed, she reached up to touch the necklace she had worn her entire life. And there it was. The jewel had been hanging around her neck all along. Like that woman, we carry within us the very thing we're desperately searching for. And yet we continue to look outside ourselves, convinced that joy must be found, earned, or purchased. I was once caught in a terrible storm while traveling, the kind of storm that grounds flights and makes you question your plans. While waiting at the airport, I noticed two distinct types of people. The first group was angry, frustrated, complaining loudly about their ruined plans and the airline's incompetence. The second group was calm, reading books, chatting with strangers, making the most of an unexpected situation. Same storm, same delay, same circumstances, completely different experiences. What separated these two groups wasn't their situation. It was their response to the situation. One group had handed over the keys to their emotional state to circumstances beyond their control. The other group had decided that their peace wasn't negotiable. This is the first and perhaps most important secret to creating joy from nothing. Your circumstances don't determine your emotional state. Your perception and your choices do. Have you ever noticed how some people manage to find happiness in the most challenging situations, while others remain miserable despite having everything they could want? What explains this difference? It's not luck. It's not temperament. It's not privilege. It's a fundamental understanding that joy is generated from within, not acquired from without. Consider the amazing resilience of the human spirit. Throughout history, we find stories of individuals who maintain their inner light even in the darkest external circumstances. People who found reasons to smile in prison cells. People who created art in concentration camps. People who fell in love during wars. People who danced in the rain when the roof was leaking. These weren't extraordinary individuals with special powers. They were ordinary people who understood something essential about the human experience. We always have the power to choose our response. This isn't positive thinking or wishful fantasies. This is about reconnecting with a truth that's been buried under layers of social conditioning. The truth that yes, you are the source of your own. Now, I can see some of you shaking your heads. You're thinking about your difficult boss, your financial struggles, your health challenges, your complicated relationships. You're thinking, that's easy for you to say, but you don't know what I'm dealing with. And you're right. I don't know your specific challenges, but I do know this. As long as you believe that your joy depends on those circumstances changing, you'll remain a prisoner to them. The world is full of people waiting to be happy, waiting until they lose the weight, get the job, find the partner, make the money, resolve the conflict, always waiting, and in that waiting, they miss the miracle that's unfolding right now. What if you decided right here, right now, that you're done waiting? What if you decided that your joy is too precious to put on hold while you wait for circumstances to align? What if you claimed your birthright to be happy regardless of what's happening around you? I'm not suggesting that external events don't matter or that we should ignore problems that need solving. I'm suggesting something far more revolutionary, that we can choose our emotional state regardless of our circumstances, and from that empowered state, we are actually more effective at changing what needs to be changed. Think about the last time you tried to solve a problem while feeling frustrated, angry, or defeated. How effective were you? Now think about a time you approached a challenge from a place of calm, clarity, and confidence. Which approach yielded better results? When we learn to create joy from nothing, we're not ignoring reality. We're engaging with it from our highest, most resourceful state. And that changes everything. There's a fundamental misunderstanding about joy that keeps most people trapped. We've been taught that joy is the result of what happens to us. The truth is exactly the opposite. What happens to us is often the result of our joy or lack thereof. Let me explain. When you're in a state of genuine joy, not the superficial happiness that comes from temporary pleasures, but deep, abiding joy, you see opportunities where others see obstacles. You attract positive experiences in people. You make better decisions. You show up differently in the world, and the world responds differently to you. This isn't mystical thinking. It's practical psychology. Your emotional state colors your perception, influences your behavior, and shapes. I remember meeting a man who had lost everything in a natural disaster. His home, his business, most of his possessions gone overnight. When I asked him how he was coping, I expected to hear about his grief and struggle. Instead, he smiled and said, "I've never been more aware of what really matters. I've never felt more grateful for being alive, for having my loved ones safe, for the kindness of strangers. In losing everything, I've gained a perspective that I wouldn't trade for all the stuff I lost." This man hadn't denied his loss or suppressed his pain. He had simply chosen to focus on what remained rather than what was gone. He had chosen gratitude over resentment, possibility over limitation. And that choice created an internal environment where joy could flourish, even amid external devastation. Now, I'm not suggesting that we should be happy about tragedy or injustice. I'm suggesting that even in the midst of the most challenging circumstances, we have the power to choose how we interpret and respond to what's happening. And that choice determines whether we suffer unnecessarily or find peace in the midst of the storm. The ability to create joy from nothing isn't a skill we're taught in school. It's not something our culture celebrates or encourages. In fact, our consumer society has a vested interest in keeping us convinced that joy comes from the next purchase, the next achievement, the next relationship. Because as long as we believe that joy is something to be acquired rather than something to be recognized within ourselves, we'll keep looking outside ourselves. We'll keep consuming, achieving, searching. But what happens when you finally get that thing you thought would make you happy? You feel good for a while, and then the feeling fades. And you're back to searching for the next fix, the next high, the next acquisition. It's an endless cycle that keeps you forever seeking, but never truly finding. This cycle isn't just emotionally exhausting. It's the source of much of our planet's suffering, the constant craving for more, the insatiable hunger for what we don't have, the relentless pursuit of external solutions to internal conditions. These drive not only personal unhappiness, but also environmental destruction, social injustice, and breaking free from this cycle isn't just a path to personal joy. It's a revolutionary act that changes the way we show up in the world. So how do we do it? How do we learn to create joy from nothing? First, we need to understand that joy isn't just an emotion. It's a way of being. It's not something that happens to us. It's something we cultivate through our attention, our attitudes, and our actions. Joy springs from presence. When we're fully immersed in the present moment, not rehashing the past or worrying about the future, we open ourselves to the wonder that's always available. The simple miracle of being alive, of breathing, of sensing, of existing in this vast and mysterious universe. Have you ever watched a child completely absorbed in play? They're not thinking about what happened yesterday or what might happen tomorrow. They're fully present, and in that presence, joy arises naturally. We don't lose this capacity as we grow older. We just forget to use it. Reclaiming this childlike presence doesn't mean abandoning responsibility or living in denial of real challenges. It means bringing our full attention to whatever we're doing, whether it's washing dishes, talking with a friend, solving a work problem, or addressing a global crisis. In that focused attention, we find not only greater effectiveness, but also deeper satisfaction. Joy also springs from gratitude. When we shift our focus from what's missing to what's present, from what's wrong to what's right, we discover an abundance that was always there but overlooked. The practice of gratitude isn't about forcing positive thinking or denying difficult emotions. It's about widening our perspective to include the whole truth of our experience, both the challenges, and when we do this, we discover that even in the most difficult circumstances, there are always reasons for gratitude. Have you ever noticed how complaining about a problem rarely solves it, but it definitely makes you feel worse? Gratitude works in the opposite way. It might not immediately change your circumstances, but it immediately changes how you experience those circumstances. And from that shifted experience, new possibilities emerge. Joy also springs from purpose. When we connect our daily actions to something larger than ourselves, to values, principles, or visions that give our lives meaning, we tap into a wellspring of sustainable happiness that transcends momentary pleasures. This doesn't mean you need to quit your job and start a nonprofit or become a spiritual teacher. It means bringing awareness to how your everyday choices and actions impact others and align with what matters most to you. When you make this connection explicit, even routine tasks take on new significance. The cashier who sees each transaction as an opportunity to brighten someone's day, the parent who views each interaction with their child as shaping a future adult, the office worker who understands how their small role contributes to a larger mission. These individuals have transformed ordinary work into meaningful purpose. And in doing so, they've created a context for joy regardless of external circumstances. Finally, joy springs from connection, not just with others, but with ourselves. When we learn to be kind to ourselves, to treat ourselves with the same compassion and understanding we would offer a good friend, we create an internal environment where joy can flourish. Many of us have internalized harsh inner critics who constantly judge, compare, and find us lacking. These voices, often echoes from our past, keep us in a perpetual state of not enoughness. And as long as we believe we're not enough, we'll keep searching outside ourselves for validation, approval, and worthiness. Learning to quiet these voices, not by fighting them, but by meeting them with understanding and then gently redirecting our attention, is perhaps the most powerful way to create joy from nothing. Because when we stop fighting ourselves, we free up enormous energy that can be redirected toward appreciation, creativity, and genuine connection. When was the last time you felt truly, deeply happy without any reason at all? If you can't remember, that's okay. Today can be the day you begin to reclaim this natural capacity. Start small. Take 3 deep breaths and feel the miracle of your body breathing. Look around and notice 5 things you find beautiful or interesting. Recall 3 people who have touched your life in positive ways. Feel the sensations in your feet as they connect with the ground. These simple practices might seem insignificant, but they are revolutionary acts in a world that constantly pulls your attention away from the present moment and toward what you lack. They are the building blocks of a new relationship with joy. one that recognizes it not as something to be pursued, but as something to be noticed, cultivated, and the truth is you don't need anything you don't already have in order to experience joy. You don't need to wait until your circumstances change. You don't need to become someone different. You just need to shift your attention from what's missing to what's present, from what's wrong to what's possible, from the outer world to the inner landscape where joy has always been waiting for you to notice it. This shift isn't always easy. And we've been conditioned for so long to look outside ourselves for happiness that turning our attention inward can feel foreign and uncomfortable at first. Old habits of complaint, comparison, and criticism will try to pull you back into familiar patterns of thinking. That's why creating joy from nothing isn't a one-time decision, but a moment-by-moment practice. It's about catching yourself when you start to believe that your happiness depends on something external and gently redirecting your attention to the wellspring of joy that's always available within you. It's about making this shift not once, not twice, but again and again until it becomes your natural way of being in the world. And here's where so many of us get stuck. We understand these principles intellectually, but we struggle to live them consistently. We have moments of clarity and connection, but then life happens. A difficult conversation, a disappointing outcome, a painful memory, and we're pulled back into reactive patterns that disconnect us from our inner source of joy. This is where the practice of mindfulness becomes essential. Mindfulness isn't about achieving some special state or having extraordinary experiences. It's simply about noticing your thoughts without becoming entangled in them, noticing your emotions without being controlled by them, noticing the present moment without immediately rushing to the next one. When you develop this capacity to notice without attachment, you create space between stimulus and response. You're no longer at the mercy of automatic reactions. You can pause, breathe, and choose your response from a place of clarity rather than conditioning. The space, this gap between what happens and how you respond, is where your freedom lives. It's where you reclaim your power to create joy regardless of circumstances. Let me share a practice that has transformed countless lives. It's called the STOP practice, and you can use it anytime you feel yourself being pulled away from your inner source of joy. Stands for stop. Whatever you're doing, pause for a moment, stands for take a breath. Feel the sensation of breathing, the rise and fall of your chest, the air moving through your nostrils. Stands for observe. Notice what's happening in your body, your emotions, your thoughts, and your surroundings without judgment or analysis. P stands for proceed. Continue with your day from this place of awareness and choice rather than automatic reaction. This simple practice, which takes less than a minute, can interrupt patterns of thinking that have been robbing you of joy for years. It can bring you back to the present moment where joy is always available. It can remind you that you are not your thoughts or your emotions. You are the awareness that notices them. Think about it, Si. When you were a small child, before you learned to worry about the future or regret the past, joy was your default setting. You didn't need a reason to laugh, to play, to experience wonder. You didn't wait for the perfect circumstances to feel happy. You were simply alive and present, and that was enough. This natural joy hasn't disappeared. It's still within you, beneath the layers of conditioning, beneath the habitual patterns of thought that tell you you're not enough or don't have enough. It's waiting to be rediscovered. When you reconnect with this inner source of joy, you become a light in the world. Your presence affects others. Your example inspires change. Your energy creates ripples that extend far beyond your immediate circumstances. Have you ever been around someone who radiates genuine joy? Someone whose presence makes you feel more alive, more hopeful, more connected to what matters? That person isn't experiencing different circumstances than everyone else. They've simply learned to create joy from within rather than waiting for it to arrive from without. You can be that person. Not by forcing positivity or denying the full spectrum of human experience, but by remembering again and again that joy is your birthright and your natural state. Now, let's talk about the obstacles that keep us from this natural joy. Specifically, the stories we tell ourselves about what needs to happen before we can be happy. I'll be happy when I get the promotion, when I find the right partner, when my kids are successful, when I lose the weight, when I have more money. when I'm recognized for my work. The problem with I'll be happy when thinking is that it's based on a fundamental misunderstanding of how happiness works. It assumes that happiness is the result of getting what you want. But the truth is that happiness is what allows you to appreciate whatever you get. When you make your happiness contingent on future circumstances, you're always living in a state of not yet enough. And here's the cruel irony. Even when those circumstances arrive, your happiness is fleeting because you've trained your brain to look for the next thing to fix, achieve, or acquire before you can truly be happy. It's like being on a treadmill that speeds up whenever you think you're getting somewhere. The destination, that mythical place where everything is perfect and you're finally allowed to be happy, keeps receding into the distance no matter how fast you run. The alternative isn't to give up on goals or to stop striving for better circumstances. It's to separate your goals from your joy. It's to pursue what matters to you from a place of present fulfillment rather than future longing. It's to recognize that joy is not the reward for achieving your goals. It's the fuel that empowers you to pursue them effectively. I can't be happy because of what happened in the past, because of what others did or didn't do, because of the limitations I'm facing, because of the injustice in the world. It's because stories keep us locked in a victim mindset, believing that our emotional state is determined by factors beyond our control. And as long as we believe we're victims of circumstances, we give away our power to create joy from within. Now, I want to be very clear about something. Acknowledging your power to choose your response doesn't mean denying the reality of suffering, injustice, or trauma. It doesn't mean pretending that painful events didn't happen or don't matter. It certainly doesn't mean blaming yourself for legitimate struggles or challenges you're facing. It means recognizing that while you may not choose your circumstances, you always have a choice in how you respond to them. And that choice determines whether those circumstances imprison you or become the very soil from which new growth emerges. I've met people who endured unimaginable suffering and emerged with their capacity for joy, not just intact but deepened, not because they denied their pain or minimized their struggles, but because they refused to let those experiences define them. They chose again and again to focus on what they could control rather than what they couldn't. They chose to find meaning in their suffering rather than being consumed by it. What sort of keeps us from joy. So we'll be happy if only others would change, if only the world were different, if only the past hadn't happened the way it did. These if only stories keep us focused on what we can't control rather than what we can. They keep us waiting for the impossible, for time to reverse, for others to conform to our expectations, for reality to be something other than what it is. The antidote to if only thinking is radical acceptance, not resignation or giving up, but a clear-eyed acknowledgement of what is right now without resistance or denial. This acceptance doesn't mean you approve of what's happening or that you won't work to change it. It simply means you stop fighting reality, which is always the first step toward changing it effectively. When you accept what is, you free up the energy that was going into resistance and denial. You see more clearly what needs to be done and what's actually possible. And most importantly, you stop putting conditions on your joy. This brings us to another essential aspect of creating joy from nothing. The quality of our relationships, not just with others, but with ourselves. Many of us have been taught that being hard on ourselves is necessary for growth and achievement. We believe that if we're not constantly critiquing, comparing, and finding ourselves lacking, we'll become complacent or lazy. We've internalized the voice of a harsh inner critic who's never satisfied, never approving, never at peace with who we are in this moment. This inner critic isn't your true self. It's a collection of internalized messages from parents, teachers, peers, media, and culture. It's a voice of fear, not wisdom. And as long as this voice dominates your inner dialogue, sustainable joy will remain elusive. Learning to relate to yourself with kindness, patience, and understanding isn't self-indulgence. It's the foundation of genuine happiness. It's about treating yourself with the same compassion you would offer a dear friend or a small child who's struggling. It's about recognizing your inherent worthiness separate from your achievements, appearance, or the approval of others. This self-compassion isn't about lowering your standards or giving up on growth. In fact, Research shows that people who are kind to themselves are more likely to learn from mistakes, persevere through challenges, and achieve meaningful goals than those who are self-critical. They're more resilient, more honest about their shortcomings, and more likely to take responsibility for their actions without spiraling into shame. The quality of your relationship with yourself also determines the quality of your relationships with others. When you're at war with yourself, that conflict inevitably spills over into your interactions. You project your self-judgment onto others, assuming they're as critical of you as you are of yourself. You seek validation to fill the emptiness created by self-rejection. You struggle to set healthy boundaries because you don't believe you deserve to have your needs met. But when you befriend yourself, when you learn to listen to your needs, honor your feelings, and treat yourself with dignity and respect, you create a foundation of security that allows for genuine connection with others. You no longer need others to fill a hole in yourself. You're able to give and receive love freely without the desperation that comes from internal emptiness. Another crucial aspect of creating joy from nothing is learning to work skillfully with difficult emotions. Many of us have been taught that certain emotions are bad or wrong, that we shouldn't feel angry, sad, afraid, or hurt. We've learned to judge our emotions, to suppress them, to distract ourselves from them, or to get lost in stories about them. The alternative isn't to be controlled by emotions or to express them impulsively. It's to develop the capacity to feel emotions fully while maintaining awareness and choice. It's to recognize that emotions are like weather patterns moving through the sky of your awareness. Sometimes stormy, sometimes sunny, always changing, and not defining the sky itself. When you learn to be with your emotions in this way, with awareness, acceptance, and wisdom, you discover that no emotion is inherently problematic. It's your resistance to emotion, your judgment of it, your identity. Even the most painful emotions, when met with compassion and awareness, can be doorways to deeper understanding, connection, and ultimately joy. Grief can open you to profound appreciation for what you've loved. Anger can clarify your boundaries and values. Fear can alert you to what needs attention. Loneliness can remind you of your need for genuine connection. Finally, let's talk about the most powerful catalyst for joy, contributing to something larger than yourself. When you focus exclusively on your own happiness, joy can be elusive. But when you turn your attention to how you can serve, how you can make a difference, how you can bring beauty into the world, joy often arrives unbidden. This isn't about grand gestures or dramatic sacrifices. It's about bringing a spirit of service to everyday interactions. It's about asking, how can I add value here? How can I make this person's day a little better? How can my unique gifts be of use in this situation? When you approach life with these questions, something remarkable happens. The boundaries between giving and receiving blur. You discover that in giving of yourself, your attention, your kindness, your skills, your presence, you receive in equal measure. Not as a calculated exchange, but as a natural result of participating fully in the web of life. This doesn't mean denying your own needs or becoming a martyr. True service comes from fullness, not depletion. It's sustainable only when it nourishes you as well as others. The joy that arises from meaningful contribution isn't a reward for self-sacrifice. It's the natural result of expressing your inherent connectedness with all of life. When you serve from this place of connection rather than obligation, you tap into a wellspring of joy that's always available regardless of external circumstances. Your joy becomes not just a personal experience, but a contribution to the whole. Your joy uplifts others. Your clarity helps others see more clearly. Your compassion creates ripples that extend far beyond your awareness. And perhaps most importantly, your example, your demonstration that it's possible to create joy from nothing, to remain connected to your inner light, regardless of external circumstances, becomes a beacon that helps others find their way back to their own innate capacity for joy.